Good evening, and thank you for attending my dissertation lecture recital. This lecture recital will explore 4 living female composers from Taiwan. The specific pieces in this lecture recital including Ching-Yu Hsiau's The Way to Fantasy, Ke-Chia Chen's To an Isolated Island, Ching-Mei Lin's Returning, and Ming-Hsiu Yan's Mirrors of Time. These works were selected because they showcase the important compositional output of living female composers in Taiwan. While there has been bias toward women composers throughout history, in present day Taiwan, the majority of music professors are women. Through their music, all 4 composers have a unique way of referencing their homeland and family. They intertwine Western classical compositional approach with traditional Taiwanese musical elements. Their personal life experience are also deeply integrated into their compositions. To a part of my research for this dissertation lecture recital, I had the honor of taking lessons with 3 composers, Hsiau, Lin, and Yan, and this lesson greatly deepened my understanding of their works. While I did not have a lesson with Chen, I was able to correspond with her multiple times. Being able to communicate with living composers about their compositions has been an incredible part of completing this project. It is my hope that this lecture recital will share the innovative compositional output of these living female composers, so that their music can be studied and enjoyed by musicians and audience throughout the world. To begin this lecture recital, I will first provide a general overview of each composer's biography. Then, I will explore and perform each piece in succession. All 4 composers share similarities with their background and training. They all received early musical training in Taiwan, pursued advanced musical studies or doctoral degree outside of Taiwan, and currently teach music theory and composition at universities. To provide some specific biographical background on each composer, Ching-Yu Hsiau moved to Paris in 1990 and studied with Japanese composer Yu-Hsin Tsai and French composer Edith Leger. She now serves as professor of theory and composition at National Taiwan Normal University. Ke-Chia Chen attended the Curtis Institute of Music and now serves there as a musical studies faculty member. Her music has been performed at Carnegie Hall and by esteemed ensembles such as Philadelphia Orchestra and Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. Ching-Mei Lin and Ming-Hsiu Yan are both graduates of Eastman School of Music, and they currently serve as associate professors of theory and composition at the Taipei National University of the Arts in Taiwan. The Way to Fantasy is a tonal work that masterfully integrates the music of Beethoven, Chopin, and Schumann. Hsiau was commissioned to write this piece as a tribute to Beethoven, Chopin, and Schumann, and she references their music by weaving a total of 9 quotes and paraphrases throughout her pieces. I will discuss 3 ways she specifically worked with the quoted material. First, I will explore how Hsiau integrated borrowed material rather conservatively without altering it too much from the original composer's idea. Then I will present how she altered borrowed material to create a different expressive character. And finally, I will show how Hsiau integrally imitates composers' compositional techniques without specifically quoting a passage. As an example of conservatively quoted material, Hsiau quoted melodic ideas from both Chopin and Schumann. Looking at measures 83 to 86. The melodic content from this passage is directly quoted from the Chopin's Prelude No. 7, measures 1 to 4. Being marked andantino and andante respectively, the overall character of Chopin's and Hsiau's work remain the same, despite differences in texture and harmony. Another example of conservative quote is found in measures 142 to 146. Here, Hsiau directly quotes the melody from Schumann's The Liebfantasiestücke, Opus 111, No. 2. Beyond a few textual additions, the overall character remains intact. An additional interesting element is how Hsiau ties together both of the quote material from Chopin and Schumann through including her own textual ideas. Looking back at example 2, Hsiau used sustained broken octave above Chopin's quoted melody. Then, looking again at example 4, these same broken octaves are found above Schumann's quoted melody, although much more dispersed. Through the use of these textural octaves, Hsiau provides unity throughout her work. I will now play example 2 and 4. There are multiple passages that demonstrate how Hsiau altered borrowed material to create a different expressive character. Looking at measures 69 to 78, Hsiau weaves together material from both Chopin and Beethoven. The melody of this passage is borrowed from Chopin's Fantasie Impromptu, Opus 66. While the melody is easily recognizable, Hsiau alters it slightly by using a different key, slightly different rhythmic values, octaves, and adding descending passage flourishes. The left-hand material of measures 69 to 78 also quotes Chopin. This material is taken from Chopin's Prelude No. 24. While Hsiau and Chopin's left-hand passage share texture similarities, the end effect of each piece is quite different. Chopin's Prelude is more allegro appassionato, which creates a fiery and passionate characteristic, while Hsiau's piece is marked adagio, which conveys a more introspective and controlled character. Not only does Hsiau combine two Chopin chords in this passage, she also integrates elements from Beethoven's music. Measures 69 to 78 are built on the harmonic progression from the theme of Beethoven's 32 variation in C minor. Hsiau only slightly modifies Beethoven's progression by replacing his German augmented 6 chord with an Italian augment 6. This alteration creates a slightly lighter and more sustained sensation. I will now play example 5. Hsiau indirectly imitates Chopin and Schumann's music through using various compositional techniques. One example is the use of octave figurations split between the hands, as seen in measures 101 to 104. While this is not a directly melodic or harmonic chord, Hsiau's use of texture imitates Chopin's Sonata No. 2, fourth movement, Presto Major 1-6. While the texture is similar, there are notable differences that influence the overall character of the passages. Chopin's work is marked presto, which creates a sweeping wind-like sensation throughout the passage, while Hsiau's passage is more mellow and mysterious, being marked moderato. This difference demonstrates how Hsiau is able to modify borrowed textural ideas and use them to create her own expressive language. I will now play example 9. Another example of how Hsiau imitates elements from other composers can be found in measures 111 to 118. Here, she references the first variation of Schumann's variations measures 14 to 24 of the name Aberg, Opus 1. In this passage, Hsiau imitates Schumann's active, flowing, wide register 16th note texture as it flows between the hands. I will now play example 11. As seen through examining these various chords, Hsiau skillfully incorporates the music of Chopin, Beethoven, and Schumann into her composition. Hsiau's kaleidoscopic approach takes a listener on a journey. Chords invoke a sense of memory, some close and present, others hauntingly distant. At first, individual quotation appears quickly, almost like childlike memories, simple and familiar, while later the quoted material becomes dramatic and brilliant. The cumulative effect is poetic. I will now perform The Way to Fantasy. To an Isolated Island is a four-movement work that Ke-Chia wrote to express the unique soundscape of music in Taiwan. According to Chen, this entire work was written to be a love letter to her homeland, Taiwan. The fourth movement each have their own titles, and this including Taiwan's place in the world, the bustling energy of city life, love of tradition, and never-ending hope for the future. I will present an overall of each movement, specifically focusing on how Chen compositionally creates an atmosphere that conveys the soundscape of each movement. The first movement, Taiwan's place in the world, is built around two expressive characters. One character conveys a sense of calm, tirelessness, while the second character conveys a sense of seriousness, anxiety, and aggression. Looking at example 13, the calm tirelessness is achieved through a weakened sense of metric pose, soft dynamic, slowly moving harmonies, and high register pitch with ringing tones. In contrast, looking at example 14, the aggressive character is achieved through a sudden extend minor third, A0 to C4. Play fortissimo with strong accents. Whenever this character occurs throughout the piece, the low A0 is represented and sustained in fortissimo, functions as a grounding presence. Since Chen composed this work while living in the United States, I interpretively believe that the calm, sustained, tireless character represents the long distance between the United States and Taiwan, while the aggressive character expresses Chen's frustration from being so far away from home. This entire first movement explores the perception of time by abandoning a regular pause and shaping a sense of time through sustained note values and register extremes, as if time is perceived differently in a foreign environment. I will now play example 13 and 14. The second movement is an abrupt contrast to the first movement, with a focus on a machine-like energy that invokes the feeling of urban energy. The entire movement consists of melodic eighth notes, sometimes double in both hands, that establish rhythmic insistence and forward momentum. Please see example 16. This present rhythmic motion represent the machine-like character of urban life. Interpretively, I found the continued S-note alternation between the specific intervals to be reminiscent of machine-like sounds found in many 20th century compositions. One example is the interval and octave alternation in Liebermann's Gargoyles Opus 29. I will now play Chen's example 16. The third movement communicates the love of tradition through incorporating Taiwan's traditional music elements throughout the movement. Through my study of this movement, I discovered that Chen incorporates traditional dance-like musical characteristics such as a singable, pentatonic melodies, and repeated rhythmic motifs, and also references the Pasadudu, a traditional rain prayer ritual of the Bunong tribe in Taiwan used to invoke blessings. Traditional Pasadudu music is performed by male voices and slowly built from 1 to around 7 parts, starting at a lower register and slowly getting higher. It should be noted that the pitches in the traditional Pasadudu do not follow the typical half-step scales found in Western classical music, and instead they may include quarter steps. I think Chen achieved this soundscape on the piano through using chromatic notes and layered textures. These compositional techniques can be seen in example 17, where Chen starts with a unison line and slowly adds voices. Overall, this movement communicates a traditional cultural soundscape and atmosphere from traditional music in Taiwan. I will now play example 17. The fourth movement, The Never-Ending Hope for the Future, is a beautiful movement that expresses Chen's dreams and hopes. Interpretively, I think this movement best represents Chen's expression of love toward her homeland, Taiwan. Looking at example 18, throughout the movement, there is a singable pentatonic melody over simple left-hand harmonies, and this creates reflective and quiet qualities. The left-hand descending figure moving from a chord to a lower pitch can be interpreted as representing the peaceful ocean wave soundscape of Taiwan. I will now play example 18. All four movements of this work uniquely represent different aspects of Chen's reflection on her homeland, Taiwan. The first movement embodies Chen's longing for home. The second movement captures the urban bustle. The third movement incorporates traditional aspects and sounds. And the fourth movement communicates reflection and hope for the future. Chen's eclectic approach to composition creates a work that engaging and effective to audiences, and she used extreme contrast in writing style. For example, this work uses both atonality and tonality, and rhythmic treatment goes between being freely floating without a clear sense of pause and highly organized and electrically charged. Structurally, the outer movements are lyrical, whereas the inner movement is energetic, reflecting the dynamic and multifaceted nature of Taiwanese soundscapes. I will now perform To an Isolated Island. Returning by Ching-Mei Lin takes the listener on a journey of personal maturity, along with a desire to return home to combining traditional folk song melodies, Chinese New Year festival music, Chinese ink painting, and Western classical compositional techniques. I will present this work by exploring these 4 areas and looking at how Lin intertwines these various compositional elements throughout her piece. An example of a traditional folk song-like melody can be found in measures 13 to 14. Please see example 19. Here, Lin used the pentatonic scale C-D-E-G-A and creates a singable and playful melody. The passage can be interpreted as represent a childlike improvisatory character. I will now play example 19. An example of Chinese New Year can be found in measures 95 to 97. Please see example 20. In this lively and festive passage, the syncopated left hand open fist against the accent right hand pentatonic melody create the references to Chinese New Year music. I will now play example 20. In Chinese ink painting, brush strokes are all down in one direction. Lin intentionally replicates this in her music through how she structures musical texture. Looking at example 21, measures 20 to 23 include repeated ascending left-hand triplet figures. This ascending triplet can be interpreted as a representing the one-direction brush strokes of Chinese ink painting. I will now play example 21. In addition to the Chinese elements, Lin also includes Western classical music techniques throughout this work. During my lesson with Lin, she told me that she primarily studies Western classical music, and this influence is prominent throughout this piece. I will present 2 examples of Western classical music influence that I discovered while studying this work. The first example is how Lin's writing suggests compositional characteristics of Ravel. Although Lin did not intentionally quote Ravel in her piece, Returning, impressionistic composition elements are clearly present. Certain harmonic choices, melodic fragments, and phrase gesture invoke the memory of Ravel's style. While reminiscent of moments in Ravel's Mother Goose Suite, no explicit references appear. I will now play example 22. Another example of Western classical influence can be found in measures 33 to 38. Please see example 23. Again, while there is no explicit reference, there are significant passages that contain open fourths and fifths, often moving in parallel motion, that embed the well-known opening theme from Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. This is combination with the spirit and dynamic of the writing. It's reminiscent of moments in Charles Ives' Concord Sonata. I will now play example 23. Throughout this work, Lin entwines Chinese and Western elements, which musically reflects her personal journey of living in different parts of the world. Interpretively, this work tells a similar story as Chen's work to an isolated island. However, Lin's piece was dedicated to her parents and not only reflects her longing for home, but also tells a story of growing up and maturing. From the childlike simplicity of the folk melodies to the dramatic chords of climactic sections, as seen in measures 33 to 34. Lin's work takes a listener on a full journey of life. I will now play Returning. The last work that I will present today is the atonal piece Mirror of Time by Ming-Hsiu Yan. Yan provides a wonderful description of this piece in her program notes, which I will read for you now. Mirrors of Time portrays a body descending into a novel world filled with mirrors. Surrounded by multiple heterogeneous cultures, she becomes increasingly aware of her own existence through the reflection in the mirrors. She struggles with the contradictions between otherness and the self. During a period of adjustment, she can only rely on familiar ways of being to cautiously probe the new environment, seeking a new point of balance. As this work was created through an interdisciplinary collaboration between music and dance, its presentation most closely reflects the original intent when performed together with dance. This work was commissioned by the dancer J. Amber Gao, and the connection between the music and dance is critical elements of this piece, as both art forms work together to communicate the story. Both Yan and Gao collaboratively create the work, and the concept of culture shock is especially feasible in the interaction between the music and dance. For example, at moments when the piano has running passages, the dancer choreographed a complete stop, and the music and dance intentionally are out of sync. This may symbolize how one continues to live according to their own habits, while navigating through various culture shocks. In addition to dance, Yan utilized various compositional techniques to musically express the abstract idea of looking through a mirror of time. These techniques include the use of subtle transformations of repeated motifs and changing tempi. This process of subtle transformations through repetition can be observed in a score. Looking at measure 50 to 56, a large interval ranging from B0 to D sharp 3 is repeated 6 times. The descending right-hand melody found in between this low-range interval slightly changes with each repetition. It gets higher in pitch, and the third repetition is twice as long. Yan explained that each repetition is different, with variations as markings including fermata, rest, pauses, and a sudden fortissimo at the end. Going back to the relationship between the music and the dancer, I asked Yan if the dancer ever finds a peace at the end of the work. Yan said she did not know. I will now play example 24. Flexibility of tempi also contributes to the piece's exploration of memory and time, and the use of shifting tempi creates a sense of instability. For example, in measure 13, 3 statements of the ascending figure unfold within a single accellando, and this followed by an immediately decellando. These cadenza-like gestures with graduated tempi adjustments and sustained pedal effect evoke a sense of movement through time. Another example of invoking a sense of culture shock can be seen in the manipulating tempi found in measure 24. Yan starts measure 24 at fortissimo and with ascending triplets leading to a sforzando chord. This figure is then repeated, however, the second time it is in duple and including an accellando to the sforzando chord. Interpretively, this sudden shift in dynamic and tempo creates a sense of unpredictability. I will now play example 25 and 26. Therefore, in this piece, Yan does not directly imitate a specific soundscape. Rather, she communicates the feeling of one who is striving to continually adjust and align in different surroundings. As a result, the music unfolds through slightly modified repetitions. These repetitions do not merely restate material. Instead, they suggest a process of striving to understanding lessons learned throughout one's life. I am pleased to be joined by Professor Roberta Wong, a renowned choreographer and dancer. She is a ballet professor at Ball State University and has taught at Indiana University and the American College Dance Association. Professor Wong has performed with the Boston Ballet, the Indianapolis Ballet Theater, and the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. We will now perform Mirrors of Time with choreographer and dancer Professor Roberta Wong. Through this lecture recital, I have gained a deeper understanding of these inspiring female composers. Showcasing these 4 works highlights how the culture of Taiwan resonates across these compositions. Together, these works reveal diverse ways of expressing belonging, and studying these pieces has led me to reflect on my own sense of place in the world. I have learned to approach both my homeland and my present environment with more gratitude. I'm also grateful for the lessons as correspondence I was able to have with these living female composers. Here, their own thoughts and ideas offer invaluable insights to studying and performing their works. For example, Hsiau shared that when she performs her own compositions, she often adjusts and refines them even on the stage. This perspective highlights the importance of interpretive flexibility as a performer. In contrast to Hsiau's encouragement of interpretive flexibility, Lin emphasized that the pianist must remain faithful to the written score. Although it may be tempting to deviate from the score's marking when interpreting a work, Lin insisted that even expressive playing must remain faithful to the score. However, Lin's work also includes improvisatory passages where the pianist has more freedom. Therefore, I'm especially grateful to Dr. Kilburn, whose classical expertise guided me in shaping improvisatory passage and in developing precise score reading skills. Through tempo flexibility, dynamic nuance, paddling, tone color, and pacing, I increased my ability to translate written notes into more natural musical language, while remaining true to composer's musical intention. In the future, I hope to continue studying and performing the piano works of these composers and further deepen my understanding of their artistic voices. Thank you.